Hi, welcome back to ITC596. This video will look at assignment 3 and some of the guidance I would give you to complete this assignment. So assignment 3 is to develop security policies. The value of 10% due on the 17th of January 21, and it's just a normal submission through EASTS. Okay, so again, make sure you read that DR Alarms case study before you go any further. So we now continue on. You've now completed your risk assessment, and in your discussions with the MD, you've indicated they really need a policy to protect data and their IP around the industrial control systems and their IoT monitoring systems. The MD indicates he thinks this is just being a little bit excessive, probably going to cost him far more than it's worth. But the company is in the process of developing some brand new IoT monitoring systems, which have attracted really considerable interest from some major industrial organisations, both in Australia and overseas. The engineering manager, however, is somewhat concerned about these the design for these devices being either stolen or hacked, but the MD is still of the opinion that the company is too small to attract that sort of attention. However, a government organisation, an Australian government, so it could be state or federal, I'm not going to specify, has said that it intends to purchase some of these new IoT devices and wants the engineering manager to describe their level of cybersecurity maturity. So this has now got the engineering manager convinced we need to do something and we need to get cybersecurity back on the agenda really well. However, the MD is not entirely convinced, but is starting to come around. So now you've got to develop a proposal for some policies just in case they win themselves a government contract. So, okay, your task. Again, a two-part task. First part is to write a proposal for security policies. So this should include how these policies, which will be in the second part, will enhance the security of DR alarms and help to raise their level of cybersecurity maturity. So that's what you've got to talk about. How these policies are going to enhance their security and help to raise their level of maturity. Now, realistically, there's lots of policies we could write, but for the sake of this assignment, we've specified 3 that you're going to look at. The first one would be a security policy that would act to preserve the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of the data. So how do we protect the CIA of our data? A policy that will act to protect their data center resources, and a policy that would act to educate DR Alarm staff in how they can protect the company's data and resources. So 3 quite essential policies that you need to look at. So as part of your outline for each of those policies, you should just discuss the following. You should talk about the intent, rationale, and scope of the policy. What are the mandatory requirements for rules or actions that you think are reasonable to put into that policy in order to meet its intent and rationale, and any exemptions that you might think are reasonable to put into that policy as well. So this report now is the whole report, a word count of about 4,000 words, plus or minus 10%, and again, references in APA 7th edition format. So again, we've got this rather fairly common scenario in private industry, a company where management considers that security is not really an issue for them for all sorts of reasons. So your first task is to write this proposal that discusses the need for the policies. So this is where you've got to convince the managing director of the need, the purpose, the scope of those policies to protect DR alarms. Now, as I said earlier, when you look back at your risk register that you did as part of assignment 2, you may well think there's an enormous number of policies required, and realistically there are. However, we want you to just propose these 3 policies because that'll do 2 things. It'll focus you on 3 areas that we want to look at, and it also makes it so much easier for us to market for you, right? So the policies are, again, a policy to preserve confidentiality, integrity, and availability of data, a policy to protect data center resources, and a policy to educate DR Alarm staff on how they can protect the company's data and resources. So it's a fairly straightforward one. So for each of those policies, you should talk about what's the intent, rationale, and scope. What are you trying to achieve, right? That's the first thing you need to discuss. You need to discuss then what are the mandatory requirements or for the rules or actions you think are reasonable so that this policy can meet its intent. What are the things that must be done to achieve these policy aims? And what exemptions are reasonable to place into this policy to meet its intent and rationale? Is there anything that needs to be exempted from the policy? What is it? Why does it need to be exempted? Now, as most of you probably know, security policies are considerably larger than this. But in order to keep this down to a reasonable size and stop you writing from now until next Christmas, we're just looking at these three parts of it. What's the intent? What are the mandatory requirements? What are the exemptions? Now, if you decide there are no exemptions, that's fine. But tell me why. Tell me why there are no exemptions, right? And give me an example that says, you know, this could possibly be exempted, but I don't think it should be because. So you're quite happy to go on and say there are no exemptions to this if you think that is reasonable, but explain your reasoning. So some hints. Again, make sure you carefully read all the case study information. You've got a little bit more adding to the mix now as part of the scenario, the background for this particular assignment. But again, go back to the case study to make sure you've captured all the bits of information that you really need. Look at your marking criteria again, because this is showing what we're going to look for in each question, and that will start to give you ideas about approach. Make sure you are making a good logical argument for having security policies, and there are lots of clues there for you in that case study if you need to look for clues. Right, remember your policies don't need to be fully developed. These are proposals, so just cover those points that I talked about a few moments ago. And don't forget your references. As I said before, try practicing that cite as your right option in your reference manager before you get too involved in your assignment, because it is going to make your life considerably easier. Finally, we're continuing this real-world problem. And again, we have this situation where many small organisations think their policies, that these sorts of policies are only really necessary for big companies, government departments. Realistically, this is not the case, and all organisations need to have policies to let staff know what to do in various situations. From our viewpoint, this throws you straight back into that problem that is considerable issues that have to be considered, particularly in this cybersecurity environment that we have at the moment. It starts to make you think about issues for a small organisation that are suddenly starting to look to sell into the export market or sell to government, and then how you need to approach and work with them. And that big hint and clue there is the one on cybersecurity maturity, and that's as far as I'll go with that. If you currently work in a large organisation or government, this may give you some really different viewpoints on some of those vendors that you might be dealing with and wondering, why aren't they doing things? Good luck. I hope you enjoy it.